I'm looking for this girl, and she has this tattoo, like a bullet with butterflies.
I remain anonymous. My clients remain anonymous. It's kind of my USP.
Full disclosure, this is not the sort of film I would typically review on this channel, and it isn't the sort of film I would typically choose to watch just out of interest, but I was sent a screener for it, so I thought I would give it a look. It's actually called Graphic Design and is a erotic thriller. You think of the likes of kind of Basic Instinct. They were kind of big in the late 80s and the kind of early 90s. You might say this one is Fatal Attraction for the Tinder generation, and it's directed and written by Andy Edwards, but it does have a element here that is kind of familiar to those of you who watch the channel regularly. It's actually produced by B-movie auteur Scott Jeffrey, aka Scott Chambers, and Rebecca Matthews, aka Rebecca Harani, and aka Rebecca Fletcher. Now those two names have come up multiple times on the channel, and it's normally kind of sci-fi, horror, kind of B-movies and things like this, but obviously they do kind of other things as well. So this is kind of another arm of their kind of style of filmmaking, although it doesn't really have the same cast. I found a lot of Scott Jeffrey's productions tend to kind of reuse a lot of the kind of the same cast. Maybe for this kind of arm of the business, there's a sort of different set of actors here. I didn't really recognise anyone apart from one guy in a very small role. So yeah, it's kind of this erotic thriller, and let me give you the kind of the basic plot synopsis. There is a very, very minor sci-fi element to it as well, so I guess if you're really desperate, you call this a kind of a science fiction film in the broadest possible sense. But it focuses on this guy called Franklin, who is some type of graphic designer. He has a girlfriend who he kind of lives with, and he's talked into going on to this kind of app called Smasher, which I thought was quite amusing. And this is an app where it's essentially like a kind of a Tinder-style dating app, but you get to kind of rate the people you sleep with a bit like Uber. You give them like a 1 to 5 rating and things like this. And, you know, so he kind of ends up going on it and meeting this kind of particular kind of woman who he has a sensuous night with, obviously behind his kind of girlfriend's back. But then he starts to become a little bit kind of obsessed with her, and it goes down a kind of a dark path into strange conspiracies and obviously a thriller element. What'll happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So first of all, let's say what I liked in the movie, and bear in mind again, I'll say it, this isn't really typically the movie I would tend to watch, so bear that in mind when you with what I'm saying here, but I will try and be fair and objective in this kind of sort of movie. So okay, so let's talk about what I think worked. Now, it's not really mentioned on the kind of any of the kind of the text of this movie, but it actually is kind of funny as well. I guess you would call it a dark comedy, but there is actually some kind of quite funny lines, I have to say. I was quite amused at some points, particularly with his kind of friend, who he's kind of has his kind of conversations with, and the sort of language that's used. And I actually found it quite amusing at times. Now, their friend has maybe a bigger part of the story than you'd maybe first think. But yeah, so there's some kind of quite good kind of jokes and stuff here. I have to say, I think the acting wasn't too bad for this kind of movie. But you know, I think it's fine for this kind of level of movie. I think everyone here did an acceptable job at least. Some I think better than others. But no, there was no clangers here, so I think everyone did a pretty good job. I don't think anyone's going to be going, oh, that acting was terrible and things like that. Some of the dialogue is a little ropey, we'll come onto it, but yeah, so acting was kind of fine. And you know, it's sexy and salacious. So those of you who are interested in the kind of like the, you know, this sort of seedy, sexy kind of movies that look at the darker side of society and all its perversions, I think there's certainly an element there. It's kind of, in a way, I do think it's quite interesting, you know, having this kind of app. I mean, there are some three elements that I like. I think this app, the way it's you rate people and stuff like that, I wouldn't be surprised if at some point that probably would happen, to be honest. And maybe it's kind of like, you know, predicting the future somewhat. And, you know, it kind of has dealings with things like the dark web, cam girls, the kind of the sex sex workers, things like that. So it is dealing with certainly the kind of the more seedy side of society and all its perversions and, you know, secrets and stuff. So again, if you like a salacious movie, you may want to check this one out. And yeah, there's plenty of nakedness in this movie, and I'll be honest with you, I was actually surprised how far it went in regards to its kind of level of, you know, of sex that it had on here. It was kind of, oh, this is more than I thought you would have in a kind of a mainstream film. It actually, I would say, borders on softcore porn in some instances. You know, you do see, you know, full naked and all this. So yeah, it's, if you like that sort of thing, I don't know, you know, Wild Orchids, all these sort of films that used to come out. I mean, I thought this kind of genre was kind of dead, to be honest, but apparently not. But yeah, there's lots there, and everyone here is, of course, super attractive. You know, a very kind of good-looking cast. You'd probably expect this kind of style of thing. And you know, as the movie goes on, and this is where we're going to transition into more of the negatives in just a second, but as the film goes on, the kind of almost the movie kind of goes down like a rabbit hole in this, you know, sort of dark underbelly, if that makes sense, and kind of goes into more of a, you know, thriller conspiracy style kind of story. But therein lies the issue with me. The main issue here, I think, you know, certainly the first half of the movie, maybe even the majority of the first two acts, seemed, you know, relatively believable in a kind of stylized, kind of sexy way. But as we kind of get to like a reveal, I suppose you would say, that happens in the movie, I think it goes from seedy and sexy into just silly, to be honest with you, and quite kind of like, what is happening here? It kind of doesn't make any sense. And as the film goes on, I think it makes less and less sense as the kind of the more kind of things are revealed and kind of character motivations are revealed or not revealed. Yeah, it ends up being, I think, a little silly and doesn't really make any kind of logical sense. Even though they have like they try and have like an explain-o stinger at the end of the movie, but you know, that gives you some broad strokes. But I still don't think it particularly kind of makes a hell of a lot of sense, to be honest with you. So the other thing I would say with this film as well, I think some of the dialogue, minor things, some of the dialogue is a little hokey at times and seems a little unrealistic, and it seems very desperate to try and shoehorn in pop culture references. It kind of references a lot of, you know, popular culture, Marvel, Funko Pops, things like this. Some of them work, some of them seem a little bit kind of like unnatural at times, and it fails again, I think, on some of the kind of the character work here. Our main character of Franklin, he ends up becoming somewhat obsessed with this this girl. I have a number of issues with it. I don't see why he got that obsessed, to be honest with you, because I didn't feel the movie did the work to make him seem like he was that way inclined. He just does. He just becomes obsessed where, you know, I don't want to say what happens at the end, but it goes into some extreme lengths at the end. And I didn't feel the movie really warranted this character kind of doing that. They didn't do the work in establishing, oh, maybe this guy's got kind of mental health issues, or he's got this obsessive compulsive kind of thing going on. No, he just kind of does it. He just kind of like goes down this kind of rabbit hole for no real reason. And interestingly, his friend actually offers him some much more plausible kind of explanations for what happens, but it's just kind of like ignored. So you know, it seems very unlikely and kind of like unbelievable at times. And you know, the things that actually he does, again, it just seems very kind of unlikely. And there's some things here that, for example, where he kind of goes to this house where he went to have sex with this particular girl, and he goes under the bed at one point, and some other people come in and have sex on the bed, and I'm like, there's no way they didn't see him. It's just like, there's no way. There's a mirror like right there. So again, it's just sensationalism for sensationalism's sake. Now, you can argue that these films aren't trying to have a realistic kind of portrayal of what would happen in a kind of like a situation like this, but you know, maybe that's just me again. Then maybe this is because I'm not really the target audience for this kind of thing, and I can look at it again. That doesn't make any sense, but you might not care if you are a fan of this kind of thing. And I didn't really see any real reason why the character of Franklin thinks the worst in regards to you know, the fate of what happens to this kind of like this kind of one night stand that he kind of has as well. So you know, there's just the movie just fails to kind of like do the work of the character work, and then there's kind of situations like the girlfriend of Franklin. She makes some decisions, and she ends up somewhere and does something which is, you know, somewhat unexpected, and she just so happens to be wearing suspenders and all of this, and like, really, what happens if she was wearing like your day-to-day Spanx or something, you know? I don't know why people would be wearing stockings and suspenders if they're just out and about, but there you go. Again, I'm just maybe being a bit too picky because this movie just wants you to believe in this kind of world. But those of you who are interested in the likes of the 50 Shades of Grey, this is kind of your next step into a 50 Shades of Grey style movie dealing with the cyber age, I suppose. There is a lot of that, and I actually think, you know, there is some sort of sci-fi elements there, some kind of like some elements there that would be interested, and as to, you know, society goes forward, I'm sure there will be a lot more in regards to, you know, cyber sex and things like that, and it could be you know, AI and things. Certainly elements I feel probably will come to pass. So as it stands in the movie, I think this movie certainly feels like it's low budget but slickly made, certainly quite stylized. You know, there's lots of kind of lens flares, and it kind of looks soft focus, so it kind of has this smooth and kind of sexy kind of nature to it. Certainly it's, you know, there are scenes here that are very kind of sexual in nature, and I think they're filmed to be kind of quite, you know, erotic rather than kind of realistic and things like this, and it's a good looking cast and everything like that. But if you want an actual kind of story, which I feel makes sense, I think this movie lacks in that department, and certainly lacks maybe in the character work as well. But I suppose that is, it depends on what you want from this this kind of style of film, I guess. So this one I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. It's a hard film for me to really rate. It's like, this is a real departure from what I would normally watch. But I feel it has some value if you're kind of interested in this sort of thing. Would you watch it? Have you seen it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.